Welcome back to Future Vision, the 2020 DTG Summit. Our next session considers how broadcasters and TV platforms responded when our lives went into lockdown. We meet the SVOD startup that's serving millions of royal superfans, and we ask how the internet coped when everyone wanted to binge on Netflix Tiger King. To set the scene and explain the marketplace dynamics, please welcome the chair of our keynote panel, Guy Bisson, Executive Director at Ampere Analysis.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm very happy to be here this morning. We've got an exciting panel lined up for you. I'm going to be speaking after these presentations to Chris Wood, who is CTO of Spicy Mango, the media tech platform specialists. Aftab, who's Director of Platform Distribution at ITV, and Gregor Angus, as you've just heard, co-founder and CEO of True Royalty TV, an SVOD streaming service focused on content around the royal family. Before we go into the panel, we're each going to run through a few slides laying out how we see the trends that occurred under COVID and perhaps delving into what lies in the future of television as we start, fingers crossed, to come out of this crisis. So let me run you through a few trends as I see them. TV's COVID bounce. I think the first thing to highlight is that there's two cycles that have been going on in the industry. One is driven by this thing that is out of our control, this terrible virus, and that has had an impact on a number of things. It has hit the advertising market. It has hit the theatrical market. It shut down scripted TV production for a good few months. But the effect of that was to accelerate a number of the changes that were already underway in terms of audience platform choice, and the way that people engaged with television. So that cycle was driven by the virus. At the same time, another cycle had already started before we went into lockdown, and that was the big producers deciding that for the first time in their 100-year history, they were going to go direct to the consumer. And that was not stopped by the virus. It continued despite it. At the same time, the audience has been shifting. So we can see that the traditional linear broadcasters are skewing, their audience is skewing towards the older age segments, and the younger segments are migrating to alternative platforms. But their savior is the streaming services that they offer. You can see that the age profile of those has converged very heavily to average. So they are bringing back the generalist audience to the broadcasters. And Netflix and Amazon, traditionally serving a very young audience, are also converging on that average. So the generalist audience is migrating to streaming platforms. There was a positive of COVID, and that positive is that some of the habits that people picked up during lockdown are likely to continue post-lockdown. So this, from our survey partner, who found by asking people what they were going to do after we came through this crisis, consumers believe they will continue to watch more broadcast TV, more catch-up TV, and more SVOD. So it has had a positive impact on consumption of television. As I mentioned, a number of new services launched despite the virus this year, driven by the studios, but also by the tech players like Apple. And what does that mean? Well, it means more choice, it means more fragmentation, but it also means more exciting content. Indeed, if we look just at those new players and just at the shows they've got in production, so not the ones they've already made, 807 new original shows currently in production from those new services when we include Netflix. So a fundamental shift in the way that we think about content, the way we engage with content, and the choice that is available to us through our television sets. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Chris Wood, CTO of Spicy Mango, who's going to talk through some of the tech challenges and trends that he saw under lockdown. Chris.
Okay. Thanks, much appreciated. Let me get started. So I think many were really surprised that the internet and OTT infrastructure cope so well, right? I think for me, there are a few things I believe explain this. Firstly, the load in terms of peak concurrency wasn't as significant as some predicted. As an architect, the number of consumers on the platform over a 24-hour period isn't really the cause for concern. It's the biggest number of consumers on the platform at any one given second that add the biggest technical strain. Moments before a live event starting, huge volumes of users are switching on, logging in, loading the catalog, selecting the stream or the asset to view, passing the entitlements checks, lots of API calls running concurrently. We typically associate this with live sports, and one thing that lockdown brought was really a sort of end or a pause to live sports and entertainment. For a lot of major service providers, this really reduced the peak traffic volumes on the network. One edge case and a great example of how peak concurrency impacts non-sports was the Season 8 Game of Thrones release that in June 2016 brought down HBO. A timed release of a VOD asset generates the same traffic pattern typically seen with live sports, a huge surge in concurrency that effectively broke the platform. VOD generally brings a kind of peak period viewing of a few hours in a day where most people are traditionally watching, right? Let's say that's kind of 6 p.m. until 11 p.m. Lockdown brought more minutes watch of content, but far less peak concurrency. And even that peak concurrency has changed, right? Folks aren't commuting anymore. Some sadly aren't even working due to things like furlough. So that sort of typical, peak period of 6 to 11 p.m. hasn't even really been so typical in the last 6 months. As a general rule, viewers don't associate VOD viewing with a hard start time like they do with live entertainment or sports. So the distribution of users over that longer period is much more beneficial for managing scale in a VOD platform. Architectural evolution is another aspect, I think, to explaining why things seem so unaffected. The way that we build and manage our OTT platforms has changed a lot in the last 10 years. I think had COVID, hit sort of 5 years ago, this would probably be a very different discussion. Platform in a box is gone, sort of big providers, Cisco's, Ericsson's, Huawei's, all deploying, big racks of servers as a platform in a data center, that really brings only a finite amount of room for growth. Scale, during this era of platforms used to be sort of replicating that implementation to another data center and adding capacity. But, both of those are sizable tasks, and all require a lot of physical infrastructure. This sort of platform 2.0 that we're in now sees a lot of service providers bolting together their OTT platforms with a combination of cloud-hosted SaaS solutions. All these elements are supposed to sort of independently scale. And I say that with a pinch of salt because the practice doesn't always work so well. So now we've got OTT leveraging SaaS, but SaaS is leveraging cloud. Historically, even SaaS providers hosted data centers of their implementations, but the evolution of cloud services has sort of removed the shackles of that old hardware and capacity constraints. So now they deploy clusters of capacity in the cloud, different countries, different territories across the globe. The auto scaling comes with a time penalty to add more capacity. It's not instantaneous. So rather than sort of adding more capacity in a region as user bases grow and concurrency grows, providers now load balance their user base across other instances globally. This is, really far more efficient for the SaaS provider. They see benefits of, a better average utilization across the entire estate. But for the consumer at home, capacity routing typically means they're sort of directed anywhere across the globe that's able to service that request at that time. We're heading for an all IP future for TV distribution, right? But for me, the technical challenge doesn't only relate to pushing video down a pipe. Fundamentally, the internet didn't keel over as everybody thought it might. Akamai confirmed back in May that the peak traffic had doubled on its platform for the first quarter of this year compared to the same period last year. Infrastructure providers have the challenge of managing year-on-year traffic growth and data rate increases. I think the challenge for media companies and service providers and keeping things operational really relates to how to manage that peak concurrency, whether it's live sports and entertainment or a timed release of a VOD asset. The current climate and the sort of COVID lockdown, demonstrated that in terms of simple consumer numbers and viewer minutes, we're already there and capable. The technology can do this. But I think what it didn't really demonstrate is how we're going to guarantee service when that volume of people tune in at any single given moment. I'm going to pass over now to Faz, who heads up platform distribution at ITV, to get her thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So it's been an interesting year for all of us, I'm sure. And what did ITV do during this time? We continued to inform and entertain the nation throughout this crisis across our portfolio of 6 channels, and that included 10 hours of live broadcast every weekday. We supported that by an increased content proposition in the ITV Hub and on BritBox. Viewing, especially to VOD, as Guy said earlier, markedly increased when people went into lockdown. It's a natural effect, given that people were at home and had more free time on their hands. In April specifically, viewing to Hub was up 82% year on year, a rise that is likely down to the amazing dramas we had, such as Quiz, the second season of our thriller Liar, as well as the winter edition of Love Island and Britain's Got Talent. Viewing has since normalised. However, given the recent announcements of additional measures, this could push the viewing back up again as people revert back to their earlier lockdown behaviours. So in terms of what ITV did during this time, one thing we do amazingly well is create programs that meet our viewers and audience's needs. So our soaps didn't come off air, which demonstrated our resilience in making content during the pandemic. But we created new shows that encapsulated people's experiences and feelings in response to what has been a highly eventful year. Isolation Stories is one of them that highlighted people's experience of lockdown life, whilst Unsaid Stories took its inspiration from the Black Lives Matter movement. Although we'd lost the Euros, we responded by replaying the 1996 Euros. This was extremely popular on both linear and on VOD and helped foster a sense of unity and community at a time when we needed it. And finally, let's not forget that we still managed to produce and air our big flagship family entertainment shows. Ant and Dec's Saturday Night Takeaway aired with an audience from the presenter's home. Britain's Got Talent has still been running, and I'm a Celebrity is coming later this year with a new twist on the location. All of this demonstrates that ITV can quickly create content that is both highly timely and relevant, and also resonates with us as individuals and the UK society overall. In terms of what this would do for viewing moving forward, naturally during the pandemic, there have been peaks in viewing of both VOD and linear content. However, as restrictions ease and life returns back to some kind of normality, we think viewing habits will normalise. However, we may see a new normal. If people are working from home, this may have an impact on the pattern of their viewing, more daytime viewing, for instance, and more VOD in the background. The other thing that it could impact is appointment to view. It's always been strong for linear, and this may increase given that less people are commuting. They will watch their favourite shows live with their families. As a business, we have we develop, own, and manage the rights to our content. We're able to maximize the value of our program brands across a range of revenue streams. This makes ITV a more diversified business and enables us to drive value from the different revenue models. Let me explain a bit more about the three core models. AVOD, Hub has 30 million subscribers, and that they delivered over 500 million viewing hours in 2019. I'm sure Chris likes those numbers. 2020 has seen further growth with shows like White House Farm, Des, and The Masked Singer. We're investing in Hub from a user experience perspective, from a technology perspective, and from a data perspective. And we continue to successfully roll out Planet V, with around 35% of our VOD inventory now delivered through this platform, which is on track to be live with most of the major agencies by the end of this year. The next direct-to-consumer revenue stream we have is AVOD Plus, which is ITV Hub Plus. It's an ad-free service and has grown 8% since the same period last year. It's for those consumers who want to watch their favourite ITV programmes without the ads. And then the next one is SVOD, which is another crucial prong to our VOD strategy, which is BritBox. BritBox features the British box sets, films and theatre from British providers, all in one place for you to enjoy. I will now hand over to my colleague, Greg.
Thank you, Faz. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. I'm just going to click ahead to my slide. Our story is really one of not a giant deciding to go direct to consumer, but rather a small independent producer that thought that it was time to evolve and consider the digital world, consider going direct to consumer. I had been working in Sweden advising a streaming tech company that was launching consumer services into the Nordics and Germany. I was back in London working on some other projects, but all anyone wanted to talk to me about, including my eventual founding partner, Nick Bullen, was how do you take content and go direct to consumer? How can you possibly do this and find an audience, leverage the tech without really having the broadcaster in place? One of the strands of content he had as an independent producer of factual content was royal content. So a real specialty, the relationships, the knowledge, the capability, the resource he has is quite a specialized niche. And the idea that we hatched was quite modest. We introduced the first TV channel dedicated to royalty, both British and international royals, and we could do it on a global scale. We'd worked out that we could probably have a very tidy little business if we ever reached 100,000 subscribers. COVID for us really has, the biggest effect it has been catalyzing and accelerating, as Guy said, all the foundational trends that were underpinning our business plan. And we are now on a business plan that is not the ambition of 100,000 paying subscribers, but closer to 1 million paid subscribers over the next few years. So it's really accelerated things. The US is very far along, but the rest of the world now has sort of been, I guess, kicked into action. People have had time at home to discover the various ways to find content. I think we've had a lot of these possibilities already, but haven't had the time to sit and sift through what works best for us, not just as a family, but as individuals. We're starting to form personalized bundles to select a suite of channels versus a family buying into a massive forced bundle with a whole variety of channels. So our story is that we met with this ambition in 2017. Within a year, we were in market with a pilot. So in the summer of 2018, we had a pilot direct service that we were using. We didn't have the means to pay for or to develop our own tech. We didn't have the means to develop our own content or to license exclusive content initially, and we also really didn't have the means to market it. So we went very prudently, as you do with a startup. We're not a heavy broadcaster or a studio that decides to go into this space and immediately can put 20 million or 100 million against it. We had to go very slowly. We raised an initial £1 million and set ourselves various hurdles along the way. Since that time, that served on the web and with iOS and Android apps. We've pushed out, we've put in place new apps. We've done a series of tests about marketing potency, and through that started talking to partners as we saw a vast majority, or a sizable piece of our 110 million royally interested on-demand streaming viewers around the world resided in the US. So why not start in the US? It's a much higher propensity to engage and convert in the US with our content. A lot of the content hasn't been viewed there as it has been in the UK. And so we launched, started pushing a little bit with Facebook and other marketing channels in the US. And we started talking to distributors. One of the traditional pay TV distributors that was adopting SVOD, just as you would find it through Apple TV or Amazon or Roku, was Comcast Xfinity, the company that now owns Sky. They have an internet-enabled box and are able to sell a la carte SVOD channels. And we were able to convince them that the world, or the US at least, needed a channel dedicated to royalty. That really became our proof of concept. Were people going to adopt this channel, pay for it, stay? Anecdotally, we now have among the lowest churns of all the channels, SVOD channels on Xfinity. Comcast, we were bringing in anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000 new paying subscribers a month in our first year with them, which enabled us to raise more money, to build out the content, start producing originals, start buying exclusive rights, and doing new formats, which I'll come to in a minute, and sign new distribution deals. So if looking at the content, we now have across the top row, you'll see licensed content, where basically we've curated the best of what's out there, going way back in time to the Tudors, Henry VIII, and right forward through all the various years being covered by the Crown. We have source content from around 30 different distributors and partners. We've redone the metadata, we've rewritten the descriptions, we've redone the artwork, we've modernized it so it can sit in services alongside the likes of an ITV or an HBO, the big brands of the world, and look just as premium. The second row are originals that we've produced since being live. Original following William on his most recent tour of Ireland. We did a documentary somewhat foreseeing the future a year ago called Meghan for President. I won't harp on that. And we have a series called The Royal View, which goes deep on various topics. Then we have a bi-weekly show that we provide in front of the paywall, 20-minute version, and a 40-minute version behind the paywall called The Royal Beat, which really connects our library to current events. And it connects us to a broader royal audience that hasn't chosen to subscribe yet. So we use that to bring people in the funnel. And that's the row you see on the bottom. Lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about distribution. So as I mentioned, we got onto the Comcast platform. Now we are a premium channel on Roku. We're also distributed through other pay TV providers and their SVOD capabilities, Cox Contour, as well as Sling TV, owned by Dish. And we're about to announce some new major distribution, both in the US and in our other live markets, which include Canada, Australia, Ireland, the UK, and of course, the US. So that's our story. That's where we're at. COVID, sort of horrible to say, but has not been a bad thing for us. We have to continue to raise money and fuel growth, and fuel the vision and forecast and ambition. So that is one challenge. We've had to raise money by pitching online. We did a crowd round, actually, which was very successful. And now we're on to an institutional round, which we're just kicking off many meetings are obviously over similar technologies as this. And I'll pass it back to Guy.
Okay, thanks everyone. Sorry for the technical glitch there. We're going to head into the panel now, which is the very exciting bit. We've got a vast range of different experiences on the panel, different size of company and different sectors of the value chain. Let me start by distilling down each of your experiences from these very different outlooks of the lockdown and of COVID and of beginning to come out of that, and tell me the one really big challenge that you experienced during lockdown, and if you have one, maybe one of the positives that came out of your experience. Let me start with Faz.
Thanks, Guy. Can I be cheeky and talk about two? Because they are related. So at ITV, we had to take very swift, rapid action as a result of COVID, as most businesses did. And we had two key priorities. One, it points to a challenge, and the other points to a positive. The first one was obviously our own people. We had to make sure that they were going to be able to work from home immediately in lockdown safely. And we had a lot of communication with them, a lot of focus on physical and mental health, well-being, and ensuring they had the right equipment. We did that slightly earlier than other businesses. What was good about that is it gave us time to kind of ease into sort of life in lockdown. The second priority was that of our viewers. So we could, as I mentioned earlier, we continued to produce 10 hours a day, right from the first day of lockdown. And that the focus of that was news, regional news, and daytime programming. 25 million people were watching ITV during this time, so we were reaching the vast majority of people that had a TV set. And that was a fantastic effort. It was supported by government, of course, but a brilliant effort from our people to inform, but also to entertain and to lift the spirits of people who were feeling anxious and nervous, and they didn't know what the future held. So they're my 2 points.
Chris, talk to us about the tech challenges, if there were any, and something you learned that is a positive to take you forward.
Tech challenges in terms of us operating as a business, or sort of generally with COVID, Guy?
Generally for the industry, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know, right? I think the way that sort of people interact with the platform. So, I mean, if you think about an engineering organization, you know, everybody working from home, I think as kind of Faz indicated, right? Not everybody runs, you know, sort of VPNs, not everybody runs corporate connections, you know, so for teams to be able to access the services and the platforms and be able to, you know, to sort of manage things day to day, you know, I think that's, you know, that's kind of a challenge when we speak to our kind of clients and customers. You know, they kind of cite the things that used to, you know, take them a sort of very short period of time to do, now take them twice as long. They find out they connect via a VPN, they don't have the access they need, they have to go request that. So I think it's kind of Fab indicated, right? Just the general sort of day-to-day of managing things and keeping things running, you know, has been quite a challenge for people.
Gregor, you're at the end of the market that largely benefited from the lockdown, SVOD consumption through the roof as people were stuck at home. What did you see, and what do you think will carry forward as a positive?
As a positive, I was going to go on the challenge, but the positive is that, as I say, it's the foundational forces have been accelerated, and I think you've talked about acceleration. Is everything that was going. This hasn't happened only because of COVID. This type of consumption. This was happening, and now it's been accelerated. People have been afforded time to understand what Fire TV is, to understand what they can find through Fire TV. They've been afforded the time to play with devices, to have to sift through stuff they're paying for now that maybe they don't want to pay for anymore in the future, and to discover new channels and new propositions that are out there that can be delivered specifically in quite a personalized way to the individual. So I think that's really the positive for television is that the consumer is now becoming aware of all the possibilities and how they benefit.
Give us your challenge as well, then.
Well, the challenge is the flip side of the opportunity for a startup. You see this incredible opportunity. We've done proof of concept. We found the marketing formula, which was an acceptable cost of acquisition. We had a whole bunch of new content we wanted to push up, but we couldn't put 25 million into marketing to accelerate the plan at a rate that the drivers were accelerating. And we have to continue to raise money. Startups are run really on 3-month sprints. You raise some money, you prove something over 3 months, and you raise something off the back of that, having proven it and the valuation having gone up. And so we're in this cycle where it's pretty hard to make a huge, massive upfront investment knowing something happening. And that's what we saw with COVID. This is happening, it's accelerating. If only we could have fueled it at the rate we wanted to fuel it.
Well, I'll give you mine because I wanted to demonstrate my challenge, and clearly it's getting virtual conference tech to work correctly, hence my sound problems. So apologies again for that at the start. But one of the big challenges, and it affects the whole industry, has been the economic challenge. Advertising has been hit, the theatrical market has been hit, other sectors of the value chain. And all of this in the year where we had high hopes for new AVOD, ad-supported streaming launches, hybrid launches from the studios with strategies like Peacock and Hulu. I wonder what the panel thinks that has meant for the evolution of streaming strategies. Has it derailed some of the thinking? Has it accelerated it? How has it changed the mix of the business in terms of thinking about advertising, thinking about subscription, and thinking about all the other ways that you can monetize? Faz, give us your view on that.
Sure, yes. It's a very good question. And, as a business, we have 3 pillars to our business. One is a direct-to-consumer business. And within that direct-to-consumer business is BritBox and Hub+. We have a studios business and we have a broadcast business. Within the broadcast business is what you alluded to in terms of AVOD. And I think the key thing for a business is to be diversified in terms of its revenue streams. Now, we were quite front foot in terms of what we've done with regards to that. So we have a compelling AVOD proposition in the market that people, is widely available and people go to. And we've spent a lot of time investing in the underlying data and technology and advertising that supports that. But what we could do quite neatly is also launch a SVOD business in the UK. So what we saw is our ability to have a compelling streaming strategy across those different business models allowed us to ensure that we could monetize our content differently. So Hub+ is a good business for us. It's sat at around 400,000 paying subscribers that choose an option of not to watch advertising. So where one declines and you have a way of diversifying that revenue in another part of the business, that is key to ensuring that you stay resilient when, let's face it, it's been a very, very tough time. And I think had we not made the investment that we've made over the last, 5 years, and the fact that we've had at the core of our strategy is this more than TV strategy, which is, how do we create a business that's robust and has a diversified revenue stream? 2020 would have been more challenging.
Yeah. Gregor, I know that you've focused initially on doing some deals with some of the large US cable operators. You've just talked in your presentation about a Roku channel. How did your strategy evolve as a result of COVID and lockdown, and how do you see it developing going forward?
Yeah, so we've actively embraced third-party distribution, which, there's a significant rev share involved in that, but there's also a lot of the burden is on the partner to handle things technically. It's actually their customers, the transaction, customer service, so on and so forth. And we knew if during the proof of concept stage that the burden was on them, and we didn't have to make the massive risky investment, that then off the back of that we could then turn to our direct service. The direct service, where it's way more complicated to run. You're now a TV station. You're now a broadcaster in a way, and you have to have customer service, and you have to interact with customers 24/7. You can have technical issues, a whole variety of things going on. People trying to pay you, they're struggling to pay you. It's a way more complicated business to be in than to just be providing content and doing a bit of marketing. So it really, the air cover of having the third-party distribution in place, having traction, subscribers, and revenue, then allowed us to turn to really investing in our direct-to-consumer business, all the apps, all the right platforms to be on, getting the marketing right, diversifying the marketing so we're not getting hammered on acquisition costs. So we've really, that's really how the mix has changed. It's leaning on both the third-party distribution and direct-to-consumer distribution, and making sure that they feed off each other in many ways.
Cool. And of course, that brings new challenges, which we'll talk about in a moment. But you mentioned tech. Chris, lockdown was effectively a forced stress test on streaming tech. I think it's fair to say it held up fairly well, or better than many commentators might otherwise have expected. But what did you learn from that stress test that was lockdown?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of demonstrated that things aren't anywhere near as fragile as maybe, a lot of people make out, right? I think that, the note around Akamai, serving, far more traffic, sort of double this quarter than they did the last sort of year, right? I think every year when there's a major event or a latest sort of technology release, whether that's 4K or 8K or something else, we go through the same discussion, right? Year after year on every panel or every session, we talk about how the increased traffic is going to break the internet. And the reality in terms of bits served is that it doesn't. I think the thing that we still haven't got to yet is really reliable, what I call control plane infrastructure. So the bits that sort of sit behind the CDN, the bits that manage the concurrency. So when we look at, very, very high profile live events, whether that's boxing or kind of football or the NBA, our platforms generally still really, really struggle with managing high volumes of users, in those seconds before the live events. People who have the ability to go and transact or buy a ticket in advance, and then when it comes to it, they can't sign on, they can't authenticate, they can't access the content, So I think, like I said, right, it's kind of proven that, I don't think our platforms are as fragile as maybe we think they are. And I think we spend a lot of time, sort of pushing that problem, out to the CDNs and claiming that, the challenge is always around bits delivered. But the reality, and in terms of what we see, that's kind of not the case, right? It rests in the responsibility of the platform owners and service providers.
Okay. Let me pose a question to the panel that we get asked a lot. I mean, we're clearly in a world where Streaming is central to the TV experience. More and more homes are taking more and more streaming services. In fact, our consumer data shows that in Europe, the average SVOD home takes 2.5 streaming services already, and that is growing every single quarter. Where does the ceiling lie, if there is a ceiling? And if there is a ceiling, how do we break through that ceiling? As the studios go direct, as we have BVOD choice, as we have niche SVOD services, something needs to break through the ceiling of stacking SVOD services. Talk to me about that. Maybe Gregor start off.
Sure. It's front and center in terms of our focus. If there's only room for 2 or 3 SVODs in a US household, we're not likely going to beat Disney, HBO, Netflix, and so on and so forth, or Peacock and BritBox, and we're just not going to beat the general interest entertainment. So you have to have the crispest, most potent proposition, and you have to be able to target it supremely. If you think of a professional sport, if you think of someone who's chosen specifically that I need to have the golf channel or tennis TV in my life, that's a decision they've made. It's a bit like someone subscribing to National Geographic 30 years ago. I'm subscribing to this thing for a year. It's going to be on my coffee table, whether it's about the jungle, about lions and tigers or whatever. I have National Geographic. That's how you, putting aside sort of the nuclear general interest war that's going on, you have to appeal not to the household, but to the individual and their individual deep passion and interest if you want to find a place as we would want to find a place. So we behave in many ways like a professional sport, not a tier 1 sport that tries to appeal to every household. Because that's the way we're consumed. That's the relationship. There's royal weddings, births, and marriages, but there's also in between those a whole bunch of things going on that the super fans want to know about. They want to know the backstory. They want to understand the history behind that. They want to understand how things work. So we provide that, and there are royal fans, and I have trouble. I think Ampere is brilliant, and have all the data, but I don't sort of buy that there's a limit of 3, 4, or 5 SVODs because it's an entertainment budget. And entertainment today is video. Whether it's TikTok or whether it's a feature movie, entertainment equals video, not magazines. In the States, they were spending on TV alone $150 a month. It's going to be more than that. Once you start adding up a household of 5 people, whether each taking their 3 or 4 things that they want and paying for them monthly, whether that's on and off or perpetually, you're going to go way beyond 3 SVODs if you're counting them all as SVODs. If they're all defined as SVODs, you're going to be up around 10, 12, 15 of them, all in the big wealthy households in the US.
Yeah, I accept your point. In the US, absolutely, where the spend is very high. But Faz, you've already got multiple streaming services, I guess, within your portfolio. What's your view on how the future will look in terms of stacking and how we get past that ceiling, if there is one?
Yeah. So I'm not able to answer the ceiling question because I think it's a very difficult question to answer in the UK market. The UK market has a very healthy free-to-air television service. And there are two SVOD services which are steadfast, which is Netflix and Amazon. And Netflix because it's a market leader, and Amazon because of kind of Prime. And the question is, how do we create something that's unique on top of that? I think Gregor's point is a very good point. Gregor's launching something that's different and authentic. The same goes for BritBox. BritBox is the home of British box sets. It's got British films. There are theatre releases in there. So it's distinct and unique, and it fills a need and and it's something that's very relevant to the audience in the UK. So I think it's more, does it fulfill a need, and is it authentic? And can you have that combined in an SVOD service that somebody would subscribe to? And I think that's going to be the interesting challenge with the plethora of SVOD providers arriving in the UK market.
Okay. I wanted to talk about content and the content boom, but it looks like we're running out of time already, and we've been asked to go to audience questions shortly. So let me just end with each of you giving me the one key trend, all of the learnings that you've taken this year from the lockdown and from the transition of the audience to streaming and all the changes. What's your one key trend to watch for the coming 12 months? And succinctly, Faz.
Aggregation and collaboration.
Absolutely. Chris?
I think we're going to see a lot more organizations adopting VOD served as linear, right? Very much like pay-per-view. If we look at, Bond getting delayed, we look at then Jurassic Park is now going the same way. Cinemas and motion picture houses are going to realize that they can't keep delaying movie releases forever, right? So are they now going to start to offer, sort of VOD served as linear with timings behind it? You go to Ticketmaster, buy access to the live event and then watch your content that way at home. I think COVID is potentially a first, a first in potentially, are we going to see this problem again in the future, right? How many business models today are just so reliant on that sort of in-person experience? Are they going to start to change what they do?
Cool. And Gregor, you have the last word.
Well, I think it's unfortunately going to be a long, dark winter of us entertaining ourselves at home, and that just affords more time for people to understand all these opportunities that have what we're providing, and to really start to sift through them. I do think there'll be consolidation as a result of that as well, and bundling and things like that will merge, but people are going to become very savvy and start making very distinct choices about what their TV service is, and it's going to be much more personalized and much more customized to the individual.
Great. Okay. Well, let's take a few questions from the audience in the last 10 minutes. So if you have any, please fire away. We've got a few already come in. I'm actually going to take the first one myself. So this one's from Alex de Groot. UK unemployment set to surge in 2021 to more than 4 million. What does that do to SVOD growth assumptions, or does pay TV take the hit? I think we expect SVOD to continue to grow quite strongly, not least because of the plethora of new streaming launches and that content boom that we've talked about. Does pay TV take a hit? Well, generally in the past, if there's a large economic downturn, we see that pay TV does take a hit in terms of a slowdown in growth, but there tends to be a bit of a lag, an 18 months to 2 year lag for any of those services that are subscription and contract based. So strong SVOD growth continuing, possible slowdown in pay TV in 1 or 2 years' time, I think is the answer to that. Next question is going to be for Faz. So Simon Fell asks, ITV has some great family entertainment shows that have kept people's spirits up during lockdown, but with the downturn in ad revenue, will that impact your ability to invest in more programs? Faz, can you take that?
So yeah, happy to take that one. So as I mentioned in at the beginning of my session, content is key to our business. Content is the thing that optimizes and drives everything, whether it's our AVOD reach, AVOD Plus, BritBox. So as you can see from what I spoke about earlier, the constraints were down to the fact that we just couldn't produce during, kind of certain times of the year. We just couldn't produce the kinds of content. But what we did was produce alternative content. The four key titles that I mentioned, Britain's Got Talent, I'm a Celeb, they are, they're all investments that are back on. So for us, content is key, and ensuring that the slate of content that we have in our pipeline to fuel our platforms is compelling, is absolutely critical and core to our business.
Okay. One more here, I think, for probably Chris. This is going to be one for you. Given we've seen broadband networks hold up with the increase in volume of traffic, do you think there will be less investment moving forward in broadcast infrastructure?
No, I don't think so, right? I think the notion of people now working remotely, you know, there are many companies kind of getting rid of their offices in their entirety, right? When we think about, you know, what we call traditional video head ends with live streaming, right? This is all starting to move towards cloud play out. You know, those investments to maintain that are going to have to be bigger, if anything, right? With a more distributed network. I think a lot of broadband investments are concentrated on sort of cities, right? But with now more and more people working remotely, we're going to have to sort of widen the reach of you know, really good, reliable connectivity. So I think this is probably going to drive an increase of spend now. Now our sort of engineering teams, etc., are a bit more distributed.
Okay. Well, one more for Faz here from Claudia Vaccaroni. Hello, Claudia. Faz, can you give us some details as which business model is more sticky with younger audiences?
That's an interesting question, because what we found is there isn't a clear separation or demarcation between the three business models. They all have a relationship between the various, you know, we blur those boundaries as as people working in the industry. We blur those boundaries. Audiences don't. So if they want to binge watch, and these will be youth audiences, on a show and want to watch it quickly, they'll go for Hub Plus because they can, you know, remove the ads. If they want to take part and don't want to pay, they'll watch it in AVOD. So it largely is driven by the need of the viewer rather than necessarily their age or demographic profile. So they are closely there's a relationship between all three of the business models that I've described, and there's no clear demarcation between them.
Sure. Sure. Let me just pose one final question then. In the last few minutes that we have, we've seen a production shutdown during lockdown, but we've also seen this plethora of new streaming platform launches that I mentioned. At the same time, viewer expectation, I guess, of quality and the newness of content is increasing all the time. How does that impact the economics of the wider business? Faz, can you talk to that?
Yes. So for us, we don't have a concept of newness. We are a live TV program. I mean, people come to ITV because they want to know the latest. They want to talk about Halloween costumes on the day of Halloween. They want to know what happened overnight, and we'll tune into this morning. So the concept of newness is there. We produce new content all the time. And what we demonstrated quite successlockdown in lockdown is that we were doing that all the way through lockdown. So I think, you know, for us, what we've demonstrated and what lockdown's been really interesting in demonstrating is how we can be very creative in producing quality output in very difficult situations that reflects the stories and narratives that are being played out in our homes and our communities. And I think that's I would say the big thing that came out of lockdown for ITV is we can be very flexible.
Mm. From the perspective of perhaps a smaller, more specialized streaming service, Gregor, how does that sort of viewer expectation that is forever getting greater impact your business?
Well, we were astonished, as I say, when we set out, it was pretty modest ambitions. We thought we thought like National Geographic, if someone picked us up for 3 hours a month, that would be extraordinary. And at times, we had parts of the world that were viewing our service for 7 hours a week, and which raised a whole new issue for us, which was refresh. We contractually, in certain places, have to refresh 5 hours a month. Suddenly, we were saying, we better put in 20 hours. So we shifted the money that was actually teed up for some original programming and shifted that to do some more licensing. And in April and May, I think we put about 20 hours of new content under the service to deal with that. And it's something, luckily, you have an eye on. You see exactly what people are watching and how fast, and we can keep up with things and move quick. But that is an issue. People that are super fans are voracious for what they love, and you have to serve it.
Yes, and it's only going to get more prevalent as an issue as the audience does transition to streaming and expectation does grow, and binge viewing is now something that we all live with. That's taken us to the end of our time. I think we've had some fascinating insights on this panel. We've talked about the technical challenges and how the technology rose to the occasion of lockdown. We've talked about how COVID lockdown, the virus, everyone consuming at home, has led to a rebalancing of business models, combining subscription with advertising, for example, within the streaming space. And we've heard about the demands of the audience that is ever evolving and changing in terms of where they go for their television content. So I'm sure you all want to join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you very much, Chris Wood, CTO of Spicy Mango, Faz Aftab, Director of Platform Distribution at ITV, and Gregor Angus, Co-founder and CEO of True Royalty TV. My name is Guy Bisson, Exec Director of Ampere Analysis, and thank you very much for watching.
Thank you, Guy.
Thanks.
Guy, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure you'll agree that was a really informative look at the challenges and the innovations that are facing the industry currently, and also the future patterns of our own viewing habits. Well, we're about to take a short break now. This would have been, in the real world, our morning break. So I'm asking you if you would like to put the kettle on and join our event partners in the exhibition hall with a cup of tea or coffee in hand. Each event partner has got a virtual stand, and at those stands they've got resources that you can download, and also you can chat to live representatives. And do keep a good lookout for those golden remotes. More information on the prize competition is available from the competition link in the lobby. Well, I hope you enjoy your break, and when we come back, we've got 2 hot topic presentations and an in-depth panel. We're going to be exploring the impact of algorithms on all of our behaviour and look at how a major broadcaster is aiming to measure its total environmental impact. Plus, the latest in TV sports innovation. That's all coming up for after the coffee break. See you soon.